Hello, my name is Lori Khachaturian. I am a professor of archaeology and anthropology at Cornell University in New York. And I study Armenia's Soviet factories, which increasingly and gradually are turning into urban ruins. When we think about ruins, usually we think about ancient ruins, the ruins of Greece and Rome, the ruins of Mesopotamia, or here in Armenia, the ruins of Urartu or the medieval city of Ani. But archaeologists all around the world increasingly are recognizing that no era in human history has produced as many ruins as the late 20th century, as the modern era. And these exist in city centers and on the outskirts of cities as well as in rural areas. Modern ruins include abandoned factories and battlefields, military sites and empty housing blocks, refugee camps, and many other sites. But industrial ruins are perhaps the most widespread form of modern 20th century ruin. These are ruins of capitalism and they are ruins of socialism. They exist in the West and they exist here in Armenia and in the rest of the former Soviet Union. In Armenia and in the former Soviet Union, the breakdown of the command economy led to the collapse of industry, the privatization of factories, and their gradual and ongoing decay. It's important to understand how intensive and rapid Armenia's industrialization was. It began under Stalin in the late 20s and 30s and increased very rapidly in the 1960s and 1970s, the high point of Armenia's industrialization. So Armenia's industrial economy was very large, it grew very rapidly, it was one of the fastest growing industrial economies in the Soviet Union. One of the things that make modern ruins perhaps different from ancient ruins is that their stories are still being written. Their futures are still open. It's not certain what will happen to these buildings. Some of them may decay entirely, some of them may be demolished, and others may be revitalized into new forms of urban spaces. And so it's this question of indeterminacy. What will happen with Armenia's industrial ruins that interests me very much? What are the different biographies and the different stories that they have to tell us about Armenia's post-socialist condition? Let's begin with the space we're in right now. Right now, I'm seated in the parking lot of what was once the Yerevan Electrotechnical factory right opposite Kino Rossiya. It was a very large factory and a very early factory, begun as early as 1928. And upon the collapse of the Soviet Union, soon thereafter, it began to descend into ruin. But over the course of the last decade, the owner has had rather creative ideas about reimagining and renovating this space into a new kind of business complex to support IT and other forms of co-working and business activities that are conducive to large open areas. This kind of reimagination and revitalization of urban space is very common in other parts of the world, but it is entirely new and very pioneering in the Armenian context. So in this space, the owner has, in very creative ways, incorporated aspects of the old architecture into the new. As you see, if you look around the space, old walls are preserved, old materials are reused, and there's an effort to try and recycle and preserve aspects of the original function of the building or structure, even as it is used in new and creative ways. What is the effect of this kind of reuse and reimagination? What is the effect of preserving aspects of the original building in the new construction? For one thing, it keeps us mindful of the past. When we enter spaces like this, we remember what once took place in these factories, and we remember that they are part of the history of this urban landscape, even as it evolves into a new kind of space. If the revitalization of ruins reverses the process of ruination, another form of practice is to actually accelerate and hasten the process of ruination. This is what we see in context of large-scale asset stripping, where factories have been taken apart piece by piece, when machinery has been removed and sold, and when buildings have been destroyed in order to extract metal for recycling and other building materials. These are ruins that disturb us. They're ruins that make us uncomfortable. Perhaps they remind us of the corruption of privatization. Perhaps they remind us of the inequality that resulted from the privatization of Armenia's assets. So these are ruins that are very different from the revitalized spaces that we're in here today. We tend to view them from a distance with concern and discomfort and usually don't go very close. But what I have found in my research is that even these heavily stripped and heavily destroyed factories are actually sites of a great deal of activity and life. And even in their current destroyed condition, people are making livelihoods off of the remnants of these factories, and plants are changing the ecology of Yerevan and other cities' urban landscapes. Let me offer one example of this kind of informal economic practice and the different kinds of livelihoods that are taking place in some of these more derelict and more ruinous factories. There's a chemical factory in Yerevan that I've spent some time at, and the reason I have is because I've made acquaintances with a man who has spent the last 20 years living off of the remnants of this one chemical factory. What he has done is purchased and sold a wide variety of machinery and equipment that he finds in this factory, as well especially as chemical flasks, which he refurbishes into some of the most remarkable vodka distilleries that you can possibly imagine. In addition, he facilitates the movement of material, culture, machinery, and equipment from this chemical factory into other businesses and other processes of production and consumption. For example, perhaps you're aware of the Nairian Beauty Products, cosmetics company in Yerevan. Nairian manufactures its soaps and other beauty products using equipment, machinery, autoclaves, and vats from some of these abandoned chemical factories. And this man, whose nickname is Chimik, facilitates this process of bringing things out of the factory and drawing them into new chains of production and capitalist consumption. So this is another kind of biography of Armenia's Soviet factories and urban ruins. Another biography that focuses on how these spaces become resources for new kinds of economic activity, informal economic practices that occur at the edges of the formal economy that are premised on recycling and reusing aspects of the industrial past.